Hi guys, today I wanted to talk about project time management because while for some it's very natural, some are really good at time management, others may struggle with it, and it is important to sort of provide an approach that people who are struggling can use or use as a basis for their own kind of planning system. And especially if you're a student, this is very important. And in fact, it's pretty much important everywhere. So today I'm going to try and give you an approach that I typically use for small to medium sized projects. This is basically 1 to 3 months of work. And this is usually what is given in terms of time for assignments at universities and colleges. So when you have a 2 semester based education, 1 semester is usually about 12 weeks, and each assignment is usually given about 10 weeks to complete. Right, so if you're given an assignment to complete a game of Mario, Mario is just an example, you can use your own example if you want to. Then you can, well, the first thing to do is plan. And you will take your first week to plan essentially. So this is your first task. And what I'm going to do is to create a list of tasks that need to be completed in order for you to complete the game. I'm also going to assign number of weeks to complete each task. So planning, say 1 week, because it will take some time for you to think about what you're going to include in your game, what things to leave out, and what kind of game development aspects you're going to introduce, like sounds, user interface, all these kind of things. And then at the end, we'll see if we can manage to complete all of these tasks within the given time frame, which is I'm going to take as 10 weeks. The very first thing, once you get into actual sort of building stage, is to set up libraries, to set up your IDE, and make sure you can run your basic Hello World application. For a game, that could be a basic window. So opening a window will kind of say that your IDE is ready, and that's what you want to have to essentially eliminate all these issues that may arise later on. Next thing is to have some sort of basic level and basic prototype. This needs to be completed as soon as you can, because you want to test out all the features that you're going to have in your game to make sure that your core logic is going to work. And at this point, we are going to use placeholders. Placeholder is like, say, a square or rectangle instead of an actual sprite or texture, because these are easily generated by the computer or by code. It's a lot easier to implement them. Let's say that'll take a week. Actually, I forgot to put this there as well. So this is probably an overestimate. It is quite important to overestimate things, because then at the very end you can see if you can fit the time frame with your overestimates, because if you can, then it's great, because you can then be more relaxed with your project. Next thing to do is probably something like input. You want to make your character move. So basic prototype is what I usually call a static level, which shows you how the level layout is going to work and where the player will be, where the enemies are going to be, etc. With input, you can now make the game more dynamic. You can move the player and, well, essentially, um, at this point, you will need to implement all of the functionality for various kinds of inputs, like jumping, moving around, firing if your Mario is going to have the ability to fire. And since we're introducing jumping, it's probably good to have some sort of collision. This will probably take 2 weeks, because there are some concepts that may not be obvious or trivial to someone who's never done any programming. And it is important to write this plan from your own perspective, because if you've done programming, then this will probably take you less than half an hour rather than just a week. Because as you learn more about the environment that you have and the language that you use, it gets a lot easier to do things. So we can now move around the player, we can collide with platforms, we can jump from one platform to another. So it's time to add enemies and AI. It could be some basic AI, just having the ability to track the player or maybe even shoot at the player. But since it's both these things, let's add 2 weeks in there. Then once you have your basic level ready, you want to have the ability to show the game state to the user, to the player. So user interface is something to consider. This will probably include things like lives, score, and maybe number of bullets that you have. And by this point, you should already have a working game, because I think we've completed most of these things. So 1, 1, 2, 3, 5, 7, 8. So we already used up your 8 weeks. So you're 8 weeks into the project, and it is expected that your game is ready at this point, or at least the core functionality of it. So we can then start adding new things like power-ups, which will take a week, I guess. Sounds, another week, because you'll need to search either online or make the sound effects yourself. We also want to probably replace your placeholders with assets, so this includes sprites, textures. I think that's enough for our medium-sized project. Obviously, you can add more things if you want to, if you think you have time. And now we're going to actually see if we do have time. So let's count the total. 1, 3, 5, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. So in total we have 11 weeks. So this is roughly 11 weeks worth of work, and that is hopefully an overestimate. Generally, for the assignment, you're given about 10 weeks, maybe less or maybe a week more. I'm going to use 10 as a reference. Then what I usually do is subtract 1 week if it's a medium-sized project to essentially guarantee some sort of safety net, so that when you complete your task within those 9 weeks, you can then, during the last week, sort of polish your project, maybe write documentation if you have to, write a report, things like that. And that just makes it a lot easier to work on your project because you know that there's going to be a week left. Even if you haven't managed to complete your game, at least you have one extra week there. So this is kind of like soft deadline, if you want. Now what I'm going to do is to try to categorize these things into things that are core to the project and things that are optional. So an optional task is something that your project can live without, but it may be nice to have the feature or whatever it is, but it's not sort of the core requirement. So planning is something that you will do regardless of anything else. This is pretty important because without that, nothing will run. So you'll need to have your basic prototype. I'm going to move assets over there because I think actually you can still live without the assets. Even without the user interface, right? So this is the core stuff. This is something that you can submit to your employer or to your supervisor. So 1, 2, 3, 5, 7. So this totals to 7 weeks. In 7 weeks, you are able to complete the core requirements, which means that you have what left 2 weeks. And out of these optional ones, we can now start sort of moving these from this category to that category, provided that you actually complete this stuff within 7 weeks. Because it may be that you'll then find that actually implementing AI is going to take you longer than 2 weeks. In which case you kind of, have 2 more weeks to work on the core functionality. So let's be optimistic and move a few things over there. I think UI is quite important. And maybe assets. And these then become optional. So as you can see, you can sort of be flexible about this. You can move things around. We now have our 9 weeks. So this should total to 9 weeks in which you can complete your game and also have potentially user interface and assets. And if you remember, we still have that 1 extra week, which is if you're really sort of optimistic about your deadline or about your progress, then you might choose to complete one of these things. It may work out, it may not, but at least you have that extra safety net, which is, I think, very important regardless of what kind of project you're doing, because there are lots of things that can happen that you can't really plan for. And it's just good feeling to know that you have this safety net. So this was a sort of maybe naive approach, but it's something that works, something I've been using for the last 5 years, I think. There are many other approaches, more robust, more sophisticated. So choose whatever fits best. But if you haven't had a plan or an approach to make a plan, then start with this, see if it works for you, and if it doesn't, you can still, use some of the concepts. You can still get some transitive skills, I suppose. And hopefully you can now complete all your projects in time. Thanks for watching.